Good morning. I'm Isaac, and I've got a joke for you. What did the tomato say to the other tomato? Catch up. It's time for Wake Up and Worship.
One shot, one chance, one life to live. Yeah, I wanna make the most of it. Everywhere I go, I got eyes on me. People checking if I'm living out what I believe. I'm alive and I'm forgiven. Let all of the love that you have given be what I give away. Yeah, every day. Lord, this I pray. Lord, this I pray. Let the world see you when they look at me. When they look at me. When they look at me. Let the love of God be all they see. Yeah, all they see. Yeah, all they see. One God, one King, one name above. Always giving it up to the one I love. Let the world see you when they look at me. And when they look at me, let them see you, Jesus. To live my life for you. That's the only thing I wanna do. Everything I do, every word I say, letting people know that it's you I praise. I'm alive and I'm forgiven. Let all of the love that you have given be what I give away. Yeah, every day. Lord, this I pray. Lord, this I pray. Let the world see you when they look at me. When they look at me. When they look at me. Let the love of God be all they see. Yeah, all they see. Yeah, all they see. One God, one King, one name above. Always giving it up to the one I love. Let the world see you when they look at me. And when they look at me, let them see you, Jesus. I'm gonna shine in the dead of night. A city on a hill shining bright. I'll be a light for the world to see when they look at me. And when they look at me, even brighter than the morning sun. Can't hide what your love has done. I'll be a light for the world to see when they look at me. And when they look at me, when they look at me, and when they look at me, let the world see you when they look at me. When they look at me, when they look at me, let the love of God be all they see. Yeah, all they see. Yeah, all they see. One God, one King, one name above. Always giving it up to the one I love. Let the world see you when they look at me. And when they look at me, let them see you, Jesus. Let the world see you when they look at me. When they look at me. When they look at me, let the love of God be all they see. Yeah, all they see. Yeah, all they see. One God, one King, one name above. Always giving it up to the one I love. Let the world see you when they look at me. And when they look at me, let them see you, Jesus. Where do I go when there's no one else to turn to? Who do I talk to when no one wants to listen? Who do I lean on? Oh, oh. When there's no foundation stable, I go to the rock. I know He is able. I can go to the rock. I can go to the rock of my salvation. I go to the stone that the builders rejected. I run to the mountain, and the mountain stands by me. When all around me is sinking sand, on Christ the solid rock I stand. When I need a shelter, when I need a friend, I can go to the rock. Where do I go when there's no one else to turn to? Who do I talk
Good morning, friends. Thank you for joining us for Wake Up and Worship. I'm so glad you can be with us today. If you were with us yesterday on Sunday, then you heard our bottom line for this week is you've got a special job to do. We learned this from the very last part of Jesus' race, right before he goes back to heaven to be with the Father. He tells his disciples that they have a job to do. A disciple is just a follower of Jesus, and sometimes we think about the disciples as just Jesus' 12, but all of us who follow Jesus now, we're like disciples too. And our mission, our special job that we're supposed to do from Matthew 28 actually talks about making more disciples. It says in verse 19, "Go and make disciples of all the nations." That means everywhere in the whole world. Go make disciples or followers of Jesus. We're supposed to find people who don't know Jesus and tell them about him, so that they can be a disciple too. And then it says, baptize them. And then in verse 20, it says, teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you. And so our mission, our special job that Jesus gives us right before heading back to heaven is that we are supposed to tell people about Jesus and then teach them to follow him. And we are all supposed to be tellers and teachers. You might say like, oh, I'm really not good about telling people about Jesus, but I'm really good at helping people understand what the Bible says. Well, both of those things are important, and you're supposed to do both. But we're going to find out later this week is we all have different gifts and abilities. And so you might be better at one than you are at the other, and that's okay. But Matthew 28 says, we do both. We all tell people about Jesus and help those people learn how to be a disciple, a follower of Jesus. Now, the reason that we all have this job to do is really found in Romans 10. Now, you might be really familiar with Romans 10:9, where it talks about how we follow Jesus by confessing him and believing in our heart and making him Lord. Well, right after that, it tells us this amazing promise. In verse 13, it says, "For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved." That really becomes our mission. When we do our special job, when we tell people about Jesus, that's our message. That's what we tell them, that if you call on Jesus, you can be saved from your sin and close to God. But here's the thing. The next verse says, "But how can they call on him to save them unless they believe in him?" They first have to believe what Jesus did to even call out to him, to make him Lord. And then it says, how can they believe in him if they have never heard about him? And how can they hear about him unless someone tells them? Romans 10:14 reminds us that it's our job to tell people. They have to hear about Jesus so they can believe about Jesus, so they can call on Jesus and make him Lord. And that's where you and I come in. Here's what I want to remind you. Later this week, we'll start looking at the special gifts and abilities God has given you so that you can tell people about Jesus. But remember, friends, it is your job, my job, each and every one of us, our job to tell people about Jesus. If you're a follower of Jesus, you're a disciple. And so your job is to make more disciples. And so I have an illustration to help us see why this is important. When you tell someone about Jesus, if they decide to make him Lord, then they're going to tell other people too, which makes another disciple and another disciple. And the message of Jesus goes to all of the nations, like Matthew 28 says. It would be impossible for one person to tell the whole world about Jesus. And so we all have to do our part in telling the people around us. And so I want you to imagine that this is you. I drew little faces on all my dominoes. Maybe you're not a girl and so you'd rather be the boy, that's okay. But for my illustration, let's say that this is you. And somebody tells you about Jesus, but you decide that you're not going to tell anyone else about Jesus. Well, when that person spreads the message of Jesus, it stops right there. It stops with you because you decided you're not going to tell anybody. Maybe you're too afraid. Maybe you don't know the right words to say. Maybe you just think, I don't know who to tell. And so you decide not to tell anybody, and the message stops right there. No one else has a chance to hear about Jesus. And like the problem we see in Romans 10, if they don't hear, they can't believe, and they can't call on him. And so we each need to do our part and be a messenger that spreads the good news of Jesus. When you fall back in line and you do the job that you were made to do, that special job of telling others about Jesus, then more people hear about him. Because this person tells you, you tell someone else, they tell someone else, and then all of a sudden, all of these people have heard about Jesus. We all have a special job to do, and that is really what we see in Matthew 28, to go make disciples, to tell people about Jesus, and then teach them how to follow him. Friends, I hope that you will join me in telling everyone you can about Jesus, and then come alongside of those people and help them learn how to follow God, how to grow, how to learn more about Jesus. But you are a big part of making that happen. The Great Commission in Matthew 28 is a message for you. You have a special job to do. Let's commit today to go do it. Join me tomorrow morning as we look at the special gifts that God has given you to help make that possible. I'll see you tomorrow at 9:45.